Hi, all. This is Alessandro Mastroianni for Krotos. Today, I'm really excited because I have finally a guest I can have a hopefully really cool chat with. And the guest is fantastic trailer composer and sound designer, Josh Fielstra. Hi, Josh. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
All good. All good. So, Josh is a legendary composer, which I think I'd have had a look at your IMDb, and you have like 200 credits in trailers or something like that, something insane like that. And I think it's gonna be very interesting because we're gonna have a chat about the state of the trailer music industry, the music industry in general, and also a little bit about the workflow and the way you use the Krotos plugins for your own production and all that, right?
For sure. That's fine.
All right. I want to just start right away to, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, but also, how you get started. I know you briefly mentioned during our little prep chat that this is basically your third career even. So that sounds very interesting. Do you want
Yeah.
to tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
definitely. I started in a purely technical background. I mean, I started programming. I was the weird, nerd kid. I took a computer programming course when I was 13.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this was in the 80s, so I was really weird. I was, because I mean, home computers weren't as common, at the time, and so I got interested in computer programming very early, and I got into that. And then in college, I then started taking computer science classes, but all the time I was always very interested in music. I started playing piano just sort of on my own when I was a very young child, so I always had this music and computer science thing going on the whole time.
Cool.
And then in college, I graduated and I became a software developer. I didn't even attempt to try anything sound or music related. I
But
think,
are you completely
you know,
sorry to interrupt. I was just interested to know if you are like completely self-taught when it comes to music theory, or do you get a bit of that as
Sure.
well?
I played band instruments in high school. I
Right.
played trumpet and percussion
Oh,
and
okay.
mallets just with the high school band. I took a year of piano in high school, and then I studied for a semester with a private teacher in college. And I did take music classes in college. Because I was very interested in it. You have to have some
Yeah.
electives, and so I took some composition
Cool.
classes. But mostly it was on my own, just by listening all the time. I was really into late night television and movies that would play things with weird synthesizer scores, and especially, well, a lot of the Italian stuff, of course. But yeah, I got really into that stuff, and I just became a software developer because, as I just knew there was no way I was going to do anything music or sound related. As the joke goes, there's the joke, hey son, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you say, oh, well, when I grow up, I want to be a musician. Well, you can't do both.
I didn't know this one. That's really good.
Yeah.
I'm
So
gonna
that's
use it with my own son, so that's very useful to know.
exactly. It's very useful, but that's what I felt, especially because
Yeah.
I grew up in a smaller, more conservative town. If you said you're about to become a professional musician or sound designer, it would just sort of wait, what? So that's what I did, and I worked as a software developer for about 12 years. I was doing enterprise level database stuff. I was doing things mostly for the manufacturing industry, and then I was living in Chicago in the United States, and I met a friend on an old school bulletin board. I met this guy named Jonathan who was on a synthesizer group at the time, and we got to know each other. He's a very, very smart guy, very technical. And then he ended up doing work for Native Instruments. And then after I've been doing software development for a long time, he said, hey, we become friends. And he said, you're pretty good at both music and technical stuff. And then he offered me a part-time job with Native Instruments, and I started doing some stuff with them. And then I just, by virtue of going down the hill in Los Angeles and talking to people in my coffee shop and meeting people, I started teching people's rigs because DJs and sound designers and composers said, "Oh, there's this guy who knows a lot of computer stuff. He can fix your rig. He can fix your music computer, whatever." So I started talking to some people like that, using some of those other skills, and then I started going from there. This is a long wind-up.
Absolutely. I think you're doing a pretty good job for recapping it, actually. It's very interesting.
And then from there, I went, and someone said, I met through another friend, introduced me to Jez Collin at HiFinesse Music and Sound. He said, because he had a sound design problem, he said, I'm trying to replicate this sound that this company is asking for, and I have no idea how they did it. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh, Josh is really technical. You should talk to him. He can probably figure it out." And I figured it out, and I sent him that sound, and he said, "Well, can you do some more sounds like this?" I said, "Okay, I'll do some more sounds like that." And then I left my job at Native Instruments, and I was started doing more sounds for there. And then from there, I started doing music for trailers and all that kind of thing. So it went from pure technical to pure creative, on a wind up, a very kind of long progression. But I think that today, where things are now, I think that this is the kind of thing I think more people are going to be doing, because everything is so. I mean, it used to be where music and sound design was a very focused discipline. It was you would, if you were a composer, you would write the notes. Someone else would deal with the orchestration and the tracking and the recording and all this. It was all these different jobs. Sound design was the classic thing where you play the Foley people, you have the video playing, and then someone's beating broccoli up and all that stuff. They're very focused, but now it's more. If you're good with the computer and you're good with the technical stuff, we're required to know all these technical skills, and so I think it gives people a lot more opportunity to get involved in music and sound if your technical skills are good. But also, I think my story is I think it will become less random in the future, because I think the routes into this business are less conservative and monolithic than they used to be. But anyway, that's how I am where I am right now, and I'm still very technical. I'm still a maniac. I build my own computers, and my rig is all programmed in crazy ways. But it's fully creative.
Do you still work? Actually, two questions. Do you still work both as a composer and sound designer? And if you do, considering that nowadays, obviously, the line is as blurred as ever between the two. When you do sound design for trailers, if you do, and I think you do, do you still do the more like musical sound design, or do you also do that kind of augmented Foley that we get in trailer?
No, I do. I do hard effects, which are more practical, just with doors opening, fist punching. I do the really, really design stuff with long wind-ups with a big whoosh into something that can't necessarily happen in reality, but and then I do music, which is part sound, like the horror stuff. When I do horror things, those are always very on the line between sound design and music. You take a repeating sound design element and then it becomes musical. And then I've done full orchestral type stuff too. So it's all over the place. And I think that's how it's going to be. I think that people who are open to that and doing that, I think that increases your opportunities a lot. But I think that that's sort of going to become a necessity more and more going forward, especially if you look at what's on TV now with TV shows and the way scores are. Scores are definitely, it used to be just here's an orchestra, or here's pure synthesis. And now it's all over the place. So I think I think I'm just where things are anyway.
Most people nowadays in the music industry know that the composer for the film doesn't do the music for the trailer. That's kind of a given. There's like a very logistical problem that the music is not ready yet, but it also is not. Is not most of the times is not as impactful as it could be. But you want to take it from there and explain a little bit how it works.
Yeah, it's because to be honest, it's kind of weird compared to other industries. It's not only that the music isn't done. I mean, the picture isn't done.
Exactly.
People are often surprised. To hear how it works. I mean, because when a composer does something, so that people understand, when a composer, or even to be honest, sound design. I mean, when a composer or sound designer gets involved, that's post. I mean, that's when you have something filmed and edited and at least some raw production sound and all that kind of stuff. So it's very late in the game. They can get involved with the filmmaker earlier on for general ideas, but by the time you're writing the picture, it's the last 15% of the production table, if I'm just generalizing.
Yeah.
But with trailers, you're trying to do the exact opposite. You're trying to get people interested before any of the assets are done. So there are a number of ways to do it. It's either I do kind of three different things. One is I create a lot of sound design or music assets that then go into library. There are very specific, specialized trailer music libraries. Yeah. And then those libraries are taken around to various ad agencies, and studios, and then you build working relationships with those people so that they and by working with them, you kind of understand their tastes, and so you try to create things that match their tastes long before they actually have something even usable, so that they can pull it off the shelf. And then maybe you can do some customization to it, of course.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time, And then there's the other option, which is because ad agencies work a lot with studios. The movie studios will work with ad agencies to help make their trailers more impactful. Sometimes the studio or the ad agency will say, well, we've got this concept. Can you create a piece of music? And then we'll cut to it.
Yeah.
Sight unseen, no having seen no footage from the film whatsoever. And then there's a sort of middle ground where, well, we have some raw assets. Can you take a look at them and maybe add some things that will help us along in this part? And then we'll take some pre-existing stuff that we already have and match that here. And it becomes kind of this custom collage job.
Yeah.
And so, but in all cases, the really interesting thing I think people are always surprised to find out is I don't talk to the filmmaker. I rarely, if ever, meet the filmmaker, the producer, really anyone even from the studio. It's mostly the ad agencies or the marketing arm of the studio. Every once in a while, like I said, I will get picture, but it'll be like 7 seconds of picture and then 4 seconds of green screen or a blank or something because it's not done.
Yeah.
You're trying to create something before the movie has even started. So you're working in a very, very specific way, and because of that, you're trying to second guess people all the time. And that's why I think trailers they get so heavy and impactful, because you're trying to create something that can stand on its own, because the film's not ready,
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, and that's how the stuff is created.
Yeah, this is actually something that I find incredibly interesting about thriller music. I haven't done a lot of it. It's one area of the music industry where that I really only touch upon, but I'm interested in doing more. And I've done a few library tracks, and I've done a few customs, and it's interesting. Like, I'd be quite interesting to know what you find the percentage between the two is, because obviously we have this thing where nowadays, especially with the barriers to entry are really, really low. There are a lot of publishers of trailer music, a lot of libraries out there, and the barrier to entry for that kind of word, it is kind of very low. But at the same time, I also have the feeling that that kind of market serves a lot of trailer music for TV promos, online usages, and that kind of stuff. And then you get the real big blockbuster stuff that is usually customs, or as you said, you get assets. There is also the old cover songs thing, but let's not trailerization of the cover songs things. But and I even had the feeling that sometimes there are specific genres of trailer music that tends to be customs. Like I see, I noticed a lot of orchestral stuff tends to be for big projects tends to be very reserved for the custom market. Do you, obviously I don't want a figure for you, but what do you say would you say is like the more or less of a percentage between the two?
It's, if you're talking purely the orchestral stuff like that, to be honest, most of my orchestral has been library.
Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I think because it's very nuanced. It's harder to put together an orchestral thing, which can be very harmonic dependent. On spec very quickly.
That's true.
And a lot of times, if you're doing custom, quickly is the norm. I've same day turnarounds are not unheard of. I've had a few of
Yeah.
those, where, and I mean, where I go down the hill to my local coffee shop and I get in line and my phone rings, and it's like, what can we have this by 5 p.m.? That's happened, a
Yeah.
few times. So I think that for custom, it's harder to do orchestral custom on spec quickly, and almost all of the orchestral stuff that I've had, and this is in the box orchestral, of course. This doesn't for the people who aren't aware. I'm talking purely, this is all in the box sample. There's no time to get an orchestra.
Yeah, obviously not.
Yeah, no time for that whatsoever. So it's been mostly custom, but the ratio of, if I look at my year and I look at how much custom versus library versus whatever, it's all over the place. It varies wildly from year to year because of what the trend is at that time, and what people are cutting to. Like you mentioned the pop song thing. I've done a lot of pop remixes.
Yeah.
In the last few years, where they've taken a popular song and changed it. I've done a few of those this year already. It's that it varies wildly. It's because the thing with trailers is that at the end of the day, it's advertising, and they're trying to stay ahead of the curve. So they'll adapt, and the entire workflow will change based on what they think, kind of sort of match the trends and all that. So the things I was doing 6 years ago are totally different than the things I'm doing now. You just sort of have to roll with it.
Yeah, that's actually another interesting question to ask. Like, I do definitely notice very specific trends from the dubstep period that happened several years ago now to the trailerization of pop songs. That seems to be very recent and still going. What do you feel is the new trend? Do you see an upcoming trend?
Yeah, there's definitely been, in addition to the pop thing, that there's been a trend of taking a single idea, maybe repeating element, such as a piano note or a mild horror effect or a violin glissando, taking that and then having it slowly build and turn into multi-layered piece that then evolves into this full-on wall of whatever.
Kind of slow burn,
the slow burn stuff, the wall of sound, as we call it sometimes. And I'd already done some of that, years ago. I did some stuff, I want to say like 7 or 8 years ago. I'd done a few things like that. And I've always done a little in the background, but now those requests are coming in like crazy.
Okay, interesting. Cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And that is a perfect example of something that's both sound design and music. Absolutely. It starts out with a single sound design motif, and then becomes a rhythmic musical element that builds, again, it's all blurry. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Which is good, I think.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna say. It sounds like it's a really cool job because of the variety of it. If you're a film composer, yes, there is a lot of there can be a lot of variety in what you do, but it's typically very long projects that tends to last 2 to 3 months, and here it sounds like you do something different every day, so that must be cool.
Yeah, it's always different. I mean, and there really is no there's no real schedule. I mean, I don't have, if you're doing a film thing or a TV thing, it's like, well, our production is this date to that date, and then there's this in between break. I mean, this is definitely more. It doesn't stop.
It's 24/7. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we mentioned insane deadlines, and it doesn't stop. Doing this stuff all day long with crazy deadlines. So obviously, and you also mentioned that you come from a very tech-heavy background. So let's jump into the workflow train. You seems to be very, very focused on that, and obviously, to an extent, if you work in this industry, you need to be very efficient. You need to be able to write very fast. And one thing that I wrote down in my notes when we did some prepping for this that kind of really stayed with me is that you said that working with a computer feels very much like controlling a puppet, I think is the term that you use. And I'd be interested to know how you how you approach that, and
Yeah.
also considering that Krotos specifically, as one of their main thing is about finding new ways to perform sound and to an extent music. I'd be interested to know how you use that.
Yeah. So but when I say that it's like controlling a puppet or marionette,
Yeah.
what I mean is this notion that if I want to do something, I have to put my hand on a mouse, which then moves another thing, which
Yeah.
then touches that thing. I mean, that's what I mean sort of by that marionette factor. And then we try to get remote control devices in there, like that have knobs and things. But that knob isn't actually controlling the thing, and you're looking at that knob is controlling another thing that you're then looking at on the screen, and you have to have your head up, and then you're looking back and forth. There's this constant. You move a lever here, and then it moves a lever over there.
Yeah.
And you're always going back and forth, and I mean, an acoustic guitar player doesn't think like that. You pick the thing up and go, bah, or you're on a piano and you push a note, and there's a lot more synergy. And so I'm always aware of that, and I'm always trying to get things into my workflow that reduce that barrier, that reduce that kind of remote control factor, so that I can get to things directly. Because I feel that the more time that we spend on moving all of these haptic things around, or I can't find something in a menu or whatever, the clock is ticking, and that creative right part of my brain is slowly dissolving.
And you're losing it. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always trying to get rid of a lot of those barriers. So I've done. I have the way that I've programmed my rig is I've got. I have an Elgato Stream Deck, which I've put a bunch of different buttons on, and I've written. My DAW is Reaper, and Reaper, you have an API where you can go in and program things. So I've got it so that I can push one button, and it goes behind the scenes and does like the 12 things that are gonna keep me creative without having to go in there. And I've done a lot of things just in terms of control surface programming and all that kind of stuff, so that if something is on the screen, my buttons and knobs are always going to control that, no matter what. What I see is what I control. So that's what I've kind of done to solve that problem, because I have to say I still haven't found an off-the-shelf remote control or keyboard that does the things that I want it to do all the time. So I've taken on myself to kind of solve that problem. But that's kind of the reason that I got involved with Krotos in the first place, is because Reformer solves a problem that we have of creating sound design, where if you're working, for example, with picture, something happens at a certain time on the timeline, and let's say I need it to consist of 4 or 5 different sounds. So what do? Well, you drag a sound in on the timeline on the place where you think it should go, and then you drag another one in, and then you back your play bar up, and then you hit play. Well, that's okay, but that's not quite it, and it's a little bit off timing wise. And that's one discrete sound, and I've got to do 100 of these. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the reason that I initially got involved with Krotos was Reformer and Weaponiser, because they solve 2 very specific problems with that, which is the whole getting things to happen in time, getting them to happen with variations, and getting them to happen in a way that doesn't involve me moving my mouse and putting them on the timeline. Like in the case of Reformer, you can use your voice. It's almost kind of going back to the old Foley way, of doing things where someone's got, shoes on their hands and which incidentally is more creative and human,
because it's a performance, right? It's
a performance. Yeah. It's a performance. Yeah. It's like it's the reason that we do music and sound in the first place, and that's the thing that I'm always trying to get, and I'm always trying to do, and that's why I set up all this remote control stuff, so that I keep my brain in the very human, spontaneous performance place, is what I'm always trying to do. And so that's how I got involved with stuff. I looked at Reformer, I saw one of their early marketing videos, where the guy's going into the microphone, and it's showing and I'm like, wait a minute. Like, this is pretty rad. But the way that and Weaponiser, same thing. Another problem it solves is, like, for example, variations, because you've got, and I'm not using it for weapon sounds. I rarely do weapons ever. Yeah. I'm using it because, for things like hits, discrete hits, I need, 8 or 9 variations of this, and I can drag in the things that I know I'm likely to use, and then I can use the synth part to sweeten things. I can use the synth part to add detail. I can turn the drunk knob, and every time I push it, it'll be a slightly different thing. Which is, I mean, you know how this is when you're doing variations or when you're trying to get hits. I mean, if I didn't do that, I'd have to copy that whole vertical thing, move it over, change the position of them, manually repitch this one, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, good God, if you give me that on a button, that's where we want to be.
I know. So,
but with Reformer, I'm using it in a way. The way I use it most is it solves this tremendous problem that we're always having in sound design and music like sound design, which is I need this wall of, say, metal clanking sounds, or if something, say, like a piece of junk is rolling down a hill. To get that kind of thing is so hard because usually when we record things with a microphone, we'll have discrete hits. We'll have like a bonk or a bonk and maybe a little bit of wrinkle. If you take like a ball of metal junk rolling down a hill, how many of those assets are you going to have to combine? Because you can't record that in nature. You can't just say, well, I'm going to push this junk down the hill. You just go run after it with a microphone the whole time. So, it's like you can't do that stuff. So what I use Reformer for a lot is I take a lot of the discrete elements, I have them analyze it, and I take the ones I know I want to use, and then I load them all in. And then once they're in there, then I can just hit a key on the MIDI keyboard and move around the XY, and I have just this massive wall of metal sounds or texture sounds or whatever that otherwise, I mean, I don't even know what that would require on a timeline to paste those things manually or to load into a sampler and try and, create a script that's just triggering them all at different places. I mean, so that kind of stuff, I mean, that's where we want to be, and especially where we want to be, going forward in the future is this kind of stuff that is just more forward linking. It's more looking, it's more human. I'm focusing on the performance. I'm not dealing with, spreadsheet in my dog situation.
Another thing that I find both Reformer and Weaponiser very useful for is to kind of divide the creative moment into the moment where I'm kind of spotting to picture and the moment where I'm layering stuff. Both with audio with Reformer and with MIDI with Weaponiser, it kind of allows you to kind of draw in, if it's MIDI or even just your voice or whatever sound, to kind of a spot where you actually need sound, and you do that, and then you do all the layering in the platform. So you're kind of, okay, I've done the boring bit, and then I can focus on getting creative and find all the variation, that kind of thing that you say. So that's another way.
Absolutely, because it's an instrument. They're both more instruments than they are plugins, so to speak. I mean, especially with I don't use the microphone with Reformer. I use MIDI, to just trigger it, and it's the way the analysis does it. It's like the lower keys on the keyboard will play the lower sound sources that you used, and I mean, come on, I mean, why would I do anything else? But and also in Weaponiser, where it does the thing where you put like when you're talking about spotting, where I think it's C5. I mean, it's muscle memory at this point. It's where my thumb will trigger all of the individual hits, and then the C sharp will trigger just the attack. The D will trigger the middle thump part of the sound, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's great for spotting, where you can just kind of sit there, watch things happen, and go right, tongue, 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 and then you've got your sketch. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point.
Yeah. You're also in the kind of very unique position of being a composer, but also, having worked in the music tech industry. So we're also talking about what the future might look like, and what I mean. This is part of it is there's very much this trend of kind of what you were describing, getting rid of the barriers between the creative process and the more, and the barrier to it. The other big thing that has been mentioned a lot is AI, and it'd be quite interesting to know, considering your tech background, what you think of that, because obviously it can be a massive help for composers, and it's definitely going to have a place in our workflows in the future. But some people also see it as a threat. And what do you think of that?
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's I went to I'm actively involved in this topic. I went to a seminar, a 3-day seminar on the usage of AI and machine learning and all this kind of stuff. We did some surveys of things, and the areas that they want AI to help them in, what they consistently say is doing the tasks that they don't
That
want
we
to
don't
do.
want to do.
They don't want it to have anything to do with writing, unless it's cranking out, wallpaper for something that doesn't matter anyway. If it's just cranking out some music, well, it can be any kind of music really in some 5-second, broadcast spot or something, but people consistently say, I want to have as much AI as possible as long as I'm in control and I'm doing the writing. I'm doing the creative side. So, hey, you AI, do all the technical things that are boring anyway. Or you go find where all the resonances are, or you figure out ahead of time whether this is going to go over, some metering standard or something, and you just go fix that.
Yeah.
So I can sit here and play notes and do fun stuff. I think that's what everyone always says, and I think that's probably what's going to happen. It's going to get easier to find sounds. It's going to get easier to do all these engineering things that become difficult for us. If you look at what a composer has to do now, or a sound designer, learning a DAW at this point is bewildering for someone getting started.
Yeah.
Hundreds of pages in the manual. No one has time for the manual. There's 80 tutorials up there per DAW just to get started. I think that AI is going to help with that, because it's going to help. It's going to be like a composer assistant or a sound design assistant, and help with those things that we don't like doing, we don't have time to do. And that's really where I see it getting involved the most, because no one is going to want an AI to take that creative helm. I don't see it happening. And the test I always use is, if I'm listening to music on Spotify, and you told me ahead of time, this playlist is all music written by an AI, do I want to listen to that playlist? And even being a very, very technical person, I would say no. And the reason is, I'm in music for humanity, because of the human connection. And even if that music was awesome, I feel like I'm not making a connection with the person who made it, and so it has no value to me. And I think that's the way, if you ask people, most of them will say this. And so I see that's where it's going to, in the future, it's going to be, we're going to stay as creative as possible. AI is going to do the technical stuff. And I can't wait for that to happen, because my studio's a mess.
Yeah. So I agree very much with you. But this is on the workflow side of things. And on the market side of things, what many composers would argue, and with what you're saying, and are scared of, is the fact that there will be probably a point, and I'm pretty sure that there will be a point, where AI will be writing some music to an extent, and it will probably kind of eat up all the market of the bottom end of the market of library music. I'm thinking scoring reality shows and that kind of stuff. And there is already software that does that. At the same time, they still relies a lot on a human being putting the production in, because the end result is not quite as good. And I find trailer music specifically very interesting for that, because trailer music is incredibly formulaic. You get these 3-act structures with some variations of it, but at the same time relies on incredibly high production values that you definitely need a human being for. So what's your take on that?
My take is that I will probably be replaced the first. I'm the first to go. It's interesting, because the example that I was using earlier with the Spotify playlist or something like that, for artists and singer-songwriter and composer, those are all roles that depend very heavily on the listener or viewer feeling that personal connection. Do we necessarily need to feel a connection with marketing? And marketing people will probably, of course, tell you like, oh yeah, that's what we're out to do. We're trying to, but the music itself, do I need to feel like the music that's being used for advertising that I have some kind of emotional human connection with that person or that setting, I would probably say no, I
Hmm.
don't. So I would see probably more AI going right into the marketing angle. I think that's probably the best place for it.
Yeah.
Is in a marketing context. I'm talking about writing pure music, like
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
AI doing, writing pure music. Probably, yeah, advertising is the first thing. Reality probably is a good game because again, it's more functional than a lot of the other kinds of music or sound. It's serving a purpose more than we're trying to get this deep connection with someone. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should start looking at retirement earlier than. Yeah, but that's. I mean, I'm being honest with it, but we're a
Yeah.
ways off from that. I mean,
Oh,
I,
absolutely.
I
I
was
agree. Yeah.
I was supposed to have flying cars by now. We don't have that.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that people, and a lot of times when I hear people talk about how they're scared of AI or they think AI is going to take all the jobs, I mean that's coming from a place of fear mostly, and I
Yeah.
think that people
Obviously.
catastrophize when they're fearful of something and oh it's going to take everything. It's like, well, I mean, my take being a primarily technical person is, I mean, I don't have that fear, but I'm cognizant of the fact that it is absolutely it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's hope that it's mostly for the better.
Yeah.
But yeah, marketing's the first to go. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
Feel free to disagree.
Yeah, I think you might be right. As I said, I'm thinking more of the kind of very basic underscore that you hear a lot in reality show and that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. But yeah, I didn't think about the marketing aspect to be honest. But yeah, I think you're
yeah.
right. Actually, it's an interesting one. Yeah.
I've seen some, and you might be thinking of the same one. I can't remember what it's called, but there's one now, and I saw a demonstration of it where basically it does very similar to like middleware for video games,
For
where
games, yeah.
it can print a
Yeah.
just more of a droney thing, but then also based on what's happening, it can add another layer on top of it to get more.
Yeah.
You need a little more tension or action, that kind of stuff. So it's still very, very clunky at this point, but time is on its side.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I don't want to take too much of your time. This has been very fun. I just want to close with one thing that I'm thinking a lot about right now, which is the classic question about the location. If you're based in LA, there is very much this idea that you either live in LA or you live in London if you're in
Right.
Europe. Um, and obviously COVID changed things quite
Yeah.
a bit. So I wanted to get your opinion on what you think about that. Is it still necessary to be in one of those two places? And also more in general, if you have any advice to give to someone who's crazy enough to do this job, to wanting to do this job.
Yeah, that's a great question because I have to be the guilty person in saying that I didn't get into this, of course, until I moved to LA,
Yeah.
and this is very like we talked about my third career, very late in life for me. I didn't start doing creative work till I was in my 40s. And it was after I moved to LA.
Mhm.
But the thing that I would impress upon people is that even though that happened for me after I'd moved to LA, the common thread is still proximity to creative people. And more, that proximity is going to be more virtual than anything else. Right now, due to COVID, for example, we're having labor shortages, and one of the main causes of the labor shortage is that COVID has made people say, "Oh, well, if I don't have to be in an office and I don't have to do things this way, maybe this is a good time to reconsider what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do this anymore." So people are saying, I want to work from home and I want to do these other things. And so there's been this labor shortage because people are making those kinds of decisions. And I think that will continue. I think now that we've seen how we can work, I think now it will be a harder pitch to say, well, if you want to work on this, you're going to have to move here.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a more difficult thing going forward. But going back to the proximity, I didn't go through any traditional. I'm in LA, but I didn't go through any of the traditional roads. Of becoming a composer's assistant or interning into sound design. Internship or getting an agent or doing it. I didn't do any of that stuff. It was just because being around other creative people and doing creative things. And I think that proximity is the most important, whether it happens in LA, whether it happens in London, wherever that is. And I also, when we did an interview, a print interview that I did for Krotos, where they offered a suggestion, and my suggestion, was take as many creative jobs as you can, even if they're not industry jobs. Do things like do tech for someone's wedding or help with someone's student film, or that stuff teaches you things, and it builds you relationships that you have no idea where that's going to lead. And a lot of the people I know now, I mean, one of the things I did a live sci-fi show with my friend Steven, who's a director. He did the craziest thing. It was called the Orbital Redux, and he did a thing where it's like, well, we're going to do a sci-fi show, but we're going to do it live. The score is going to be live. Everything's going to be live. And it was a live streaming thing where fans could type. They could type what they want, where they want the plot to go. They'd done a couple different plot variations, cool. And then in real time, they would. It was awesome. But I mean, I met that guy because I was helping with his wife's puppet show. So it's like it's getting yourself involved in creative things like that. And I did puppet show with them, and they did a little holiday thing, which has nothing to do with my industry, but I met all these people that are awesome and are amazing. And I think that's the most important thing is I think that a lot of times composers or sound designers, they think that, well, my music just needs to be really good. Yeah. And then I'm going to float to the top, but maybe it's a good time to share the bad news that, hey, I know. Yeah. We have here's the next Dark Knight movie. Well, who should score it? Well, I don't know. Let's have a contest, and whoever writes the best music, that's just not.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. Yeah, it's funny because I've heard both versions, and one is, you don't worry about, going out there. Just focus on writing amazing music, and you will have success. And at the same time, I've also heard the opposite. Don't focus on writing good music and invest more on going out there. And probably they're both, wrong. You just need to have incredibly good music, and you do need to get out there.
I mean, look, the reality is that every day there are 500 people getting off a plane or a bus or whatever who are far more talented than I am, and who are far more talented, quote unquote, than Hans Zimmer. Yeah. Okay, it's not the talent or the great music or whatever. It's proximity to creative people and building good relationships and having productive human experiences with people that are sincere and having your tech chops up. That's if I wish it were if it were just purely the best music, well, then they would just hold contests, and whoever wins the best music contest would score the film. It's much more complicated. It's can you sit in a meeting? Can you take a brief? Can you turn things in on time? Can you respond to our creative input? Do we like you as a human being, et cetera, et cetera? Those are extremely important things for navigating this world. So yeah, there's some business chops in there. There's some proximity, all that kind of stuff. Even as I said, that proximity is now getting more virtual. That's my opinion as being for someone who didn't come up directly into this industry in the traditional way, and I'm kind of looking at it from hopefully a slightly more third-person perspective than the average person. But yeah, that's my feeling.
All right, thank you so much, Josh. This was very helpful and a lot of fun. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
All right. Okay. Later. Bye bye.